He looked me dead in the eyes and he goes, well, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear. It went from X's and O's and wins and losses to Jimmy's and Joe's, and that just flipped everything. It is 50 guys in a room deciding, what we're going to be about. The kids who take a game of checkers to death, those teams tend to be very successful. What can I do to leave a lasting impact on these kids? That is what builds great programs.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Clubhouse Talks. Today we have on a longtime customer of Clubhouse Athletic, Patrick Gager, previously with Saint Viator, Lacrosse, now launching his own pure goalie development, a coach at Team Illinois, plenty of other things, mid-ice hockey, I believe, an athlete himself too still. So Patrick, great to have you on.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said longtime customer. Happy to give Clubhouse a plug whenever I can. You guys have been absolutely incredible. And, you guys always nail it. And I've shared you with countless friends and family and, both your professionalism, how you guys deliver, and then the product that you deliver. I mean, you guys have been awesome. So kudos to everything you guys do and how fast you guys have grown. It's been really fun watching you guys from afar and, obviously being a part of that growth.
For the record, we didn't ask for you to put a plug into the show, but that was great to start it off for us. So having coached at Saint Viator, an elite like lacrosse program in the state, I think give us a background of where you've coached your career so far and what you're up to now.
Yeah, I'll always try and give the short-winded because I do love to talk. But I attended St. Viator High School. I'm an alumni, class of 2008. Went to Adrian College, played lacrosse there. It was a brand new program. They were only a second-year program my freshman year. So a lot of Midwest guys gravitated towards there to try and, kind of build something. And it was wonderful. I wouldn't have traded it for anything. I got to play with guys from Canada that played in Orangeville for the Northmen, which are a junior A powerhouse out in Ontario. And I got exposed to the box game, early, especially for a Midwest guy. It was just so cool. And I just did not realize this lacrosse landscape that was out there. And it just blew my mind. And so I came back, obviously after college and did whatever, Chicago suburban kid does and got the job in the city, moved to the city, and, loved it. But I ended up actually getting laid off for my first job, which was really eye-opening because, that first job I was at a cube, I was cold calling for a medical software company, and it was just not for me. I just did not like it. I'm a people person. Kind of went back to the drawing board, and oddly enough, I went back to my high school coach, Bill Sanford, shout out College of DuPage. He's the head coach there, but just kind of picked his brain because he was the dean of students at the time at Viator and still coaching, head coach there. And I was just like, man, you seem like you love what you do. I think I would love coaching. I don't know, but like your personality is very much my personality. How do I get there? And he looked me dead in the eyes and he goes, well, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear. He goes, you're going to have to go back to school. And, if you knew me at that time, I was not a great student. I struggled mightily through high school, through undergrad, and I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. I was kind of a little disheartened because I was like, there's no way I'm going to go get a master's. Oddly enough, that night, I went online and I just searched, grad programs for aspiring lacrosse coaches. And Robert Morris University in the city actually just opened a GA position for their boys lacrosse program. And I did not meet the requirements. My grades were not great. I wrote a 3-page paper to the president of Robert Morris University, kind of explaining my struggles. I had some learning differences. I was in kind of like an aided program through high school and college and just kind of shared it. I just kind of laid it all out there, just kind of where I was professionally and, kind of wanting to take that stuff more seriously. She called me in for an interview. I sat down with her. We talked for like 2 hours. And she goes, in all of my years of being the president of universities, especially at the grad program, I've never had somebody candidly share that, like really share that. And she goes, I think you're going to take this seriously. We want to kind of take a chance and take you on. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I got my master's in 2 years. I was an associate head coach at Robert Morris for 2 years. It was incredible. I graduated with a 3.9 GPA, and it was just the most kind of full circle experience. So I really got to have a different perspective And that's where I fell in love with working in education and coaching because I started realizing I had a story to tell that was going to resonate with families and players. And I really just found my niche. And after I parted ways with Robert Morris, I became an assistant director of enrollment and head coach at St. Lawrence High School on the South Side. I was there for about a year and a half. And then all of a sudden, Viator picked up the phone and called. Bill Sanford, my high school coach, picked up the phone. And, him and I throughout the years were talking. And he was actually getting ready to step down as head coach. And there was a position opening in enrollment. And it all kind of aligned with what I was doing professionally. Before Bill even mentioned lacrosse. He said, "Hey, look, I got some really strong candidates. I don't know if you'll be the head coach, but you'll be in building. You'll definitely be on the staff. Let's just see what happens. Let's get you in the building." So I get in the building, that summer, August, September rolls around, October rolls around, and Bill's like, he calls me into his office and he goes, "Hey man, look, like we're kind of kicking the can on a few guys." He goes, the toughest thing we have right now is we've got guys, and he goes, "No offense, that are probably more qualified than you are just from, a coaching perspective and X's and O's." He goes, "But my fear is that we're going to hire somebody who just doesn't understand the culture here." And Bill was a very culture driven coach. And he goes, I maybe I regret this, maybe I don't, but he goes, "I want to offer you the head coaching position." I just about had a heart attack. I started crying. Like it was really my dream to take over not only the program, but after my biggest mentor. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And I probably had a rare experience than most coaches where my mentor and the guy I was learning from was still in the building. So Bill did a really great job early of kind of falling on grenades and having kind of correcting me where I was making mistakes in areas that I don't think young coaches really look at right out of the gate. Just responding to emails. I'm a very quick responder. I kind of have that lens where I got to respond to things really fast because that's going to get the respect of the community, of the parents. While that's very true, you also want to be thoughtful in your responses. You don't want to just be quick because, maybe you're saying what you just want that parent to hear or that player to hear, but that's not really what the correct answer is and going to have longevity in that answer. And he did a really good job of, just opening my eyes to giving the parents an experience just as much as giving the players an experience. And at a private high school, God, that is so true because those parents are writing those tuition checks. And if they don't feel connected to the program, as much as their son or daughter might be having a wonderful experience, they could leave in a year. They could leave in 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is. And I matured pretty fast because he allowed me to peek behind the curtain, make mistakes, and kind of fall on my face a little bit, but then put an arm around me and say, "Hey, didn't I kind of tell you that was going to happen?" type of thing. And we could learn through it together. And man, it was just wonderful. So yeah, so I was at Viator for 6 years, the greatest 6 years of my professional and coaching life. But just internally, unfortunately, just some things were shifting. My family was growing. I needed to kind of start pivoting a little bit and kind of finding something that gave my family some solid footing. So I just took some external positions. And then I've now recently been working at a company called Educational Environments, still in that educational space, which is great. I get to kind of use my experience being behind the walls of schools and knowing what's important to administration and aligning that with the services that we provide. But it's definitely been at the detriment of kind of having to step away from coaching, which, I'm sure you can tell is something that I'm really passionate about and love and am slowly getting back into, hence the Pure Goalie Development logo behind me. As you mentioned, getting back with Team Illinois. Started back with them this past fall and winter. And then we've got our busy season in the summer going to all of our tournaments. So it has been so wonderful getting back into it. I'm coaching the 2030, so eighth graders, which I think is a really cool spot for me because I am really taking this as an opportunity to prepare these kids for high school where, at the club level, you play with kids your age for pretty much, 5, 6 years of your playing career. You go to high school now, you're playing with 18-year-old, 17-year-old men. And it's just a different world. And I think the leadership of those kids is what they lack coming in early and young, and that maturity. So that's what I'm trying to do, is bring my high school experience and what I valued as a high school coach at the varsity level, from seeing a young athlete, the kids who came in who just kind of got it early, and trying to convey that to them as early as possible so they're prepared to step in those doors of their high school and be ready to rock.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. I think you framed the rest of this interview too well, because I think you touched on like culture that we're going to be diving into. And we touched on mentorship, and we touched on a little bit of getting into club from a high school previous experience. So those are kind of three different things we'll get in detail about. And starting one with culture, and almost every one of these interviews I do, culture comes up, and I always say, like, it just feels so weird saying culture because it just falls flat in so many ways. The word itself is so meaningful and meaningless at the same time. But in the way that you're speaking about it, I feel like it is the meaningful route, because it seems there's just a lot of intent behind what you're doing when it comes to culture. And you spoke about, you walked into a program at Viator with a very strong culture, and you then seem to have built on top of that. So talk about your perspective on culture, and we'll dive into kind of like the X's and O's about how you built your culture and what maybe Bill has taught you about it too.
Sure. So you are right. Culture is a buzzword, and it can be a trap because you hear it far too often. Now, I again will always go back to kind of how I formatted my culture. I had the blessing of coaching at a place that was very special to me, that I was a student at, where my parents formed friendships, my older brothers went to. I got, dumped by my first girlfriend at this place. I went to dances, had so many kind of life happenings in a very special place. So to me, how I developed culture was a 30,000-foot view, because I could touch on so many different areas. And again, it's different for me. And I took the perspective of being at a private Catholic high school where we have tuition paying families. I took it very personally, where I owed it to these families to give them an elevated experience from the other places that they could go to. Obviously, the public options where you're not signing a check to send your child to, or even the boarding schools, right? Viator was very blessed to be a lacrosse destination for families all over the area. And we have to battle, losing kids to the Culvers and the Western Reserves and, the other boarding schools across the country. So, what am I doing that is giving these families an elevated experience? So what I always like to do is right out of the gate, like when I talk to a family, by the time they get to me and their recruiting cycle, right, or choosing Saint Viator, we don't really talk about lacrosse. And I don't want to, because what led me back to Saint Viator was so many other things other than my lacrosse experiences. Now, yes, was Bill Sanford my lacrosse coach? 100%. But guess what? He was my ethics teacher. He was a dean of students. He was a friend. There were so many more important things that he did in my life than lacrosse. Lacrosse was just common footing. And that's what I always try to reiterate to these boys, is that we're going to use lacrosse as a vehicle to come together. But there are going to be so many things that you see that we stress on that aren't really even lacrosse related, that are going to, win us games and take us to state championships. But you're going to leave and you're going to graduate. And my ultimate goal, is that in 8 years from now, when you're engaged and you're getting married, that invite comes in my mail and I get to watch you start building your life. Because to be honest, that's what Bill did for me. I mean, he was at my wedding when my dad passed away. He was at my dad's funeral. When my daughter was born, he was one of the first people to call me. Like, to me, when I say culture, that's what I mean. It's not, we go and do paintball, or, we do these, this company comes in and we do a high ropes course or whatever, that stuff's great and it's going to build your cohesiveness. But what I mean by that is, when we come up with our team mantra, I don't walk into a room and go, "Hey boys, our team mantra for the year is MFLA, mission first, Lions always." I presented it and I said, "Fellas, this is what it means. This is a military saying. This is how I found it. This is what I think it could do to the program. Seniors, prospective captains, Johnny, you got a group of 10 guys. Jimmy, you got a group of 10 guys. Nikki, you got a group of 10 guys. And we split them up. I'm going to give you a week to research what this means. If you think it's terrible and it doesn't connect with the team, that is an option. And you let me know that. But if you really dive into it and you see what the meaning of mission first, Lions always, or it's a Marine saying, mission first, Marines always, go look at what that means. If you think that resonates with what we're trying to accomplish here and our approach to our everyday, then I want you to come back and tell me the parameters of how we're going to operate and what that means to the program. And the boys all came back and they did presentations back to the program, each group, about what they think that means and how we can incorporate that every single day. And again, that's culture. It's not me talking at them. It is 50 guys in a room deciding, what we're going to be about, because I may think what I have is like awesome and like, we're going to run with this and I'm going to go make a social post and this is who we are. But then the kids are like, that means nothing to me. You've never mentioned that. You said it once and then you never replicated it. Like it's repeatable action is culture.
Yeah. Is it? I'll cut out. All right. I think it cut out at just the right time, though. I heard you at the end saying repeatable action is the culture. And I think what you're saying, too, is it's like so true of like, yeah, somebody could have found the MFMA and, it's the Marines. So, yeah, like it looks like that. I mean, that is what like family and brotherhood is like. You could see why it's so impactful. But it's like, well, putting it onto your program means nothing because you're not the Marines. You got to figure out how to make it work for you, and having the athletes themselves and the kids themselves speak it back themselves in their own words. And then it sounds like you had a mixed groups, like they're probably not just with their friends when they're making this presentation, right? So they're talking with each other, not just their buddy, not taking it too seriously. Going to have to take it more serious because you're working with somebody you maybe don't know too well.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I think too, like a refreshing perspective is you're going to have a senior who's been through 3 years of your high school program, who understands the intricacies and like kind of knows where you want to guide conversations. So maybe sometimes they just give you the answers that they know will make you happy. But a freshman whose family lives in Huntley, who, is making huge financial sacrifices to come here, that freshman and their parents may have had conversations for the last 3 years about why they wanted to choose Saint Viator. And maybe that kid stands up in front of a senior and goes, this is why I chose to come here. And last year, during your state playoff game against Lake Forest, I watched, this person, they didn't score a single goal, but they got 6 ground balls and they were so juiced up. Like, that was what made me want to come here, or something completely off the walls, like that senior may not really be thinking of, but they're like, holy cow, like, yeah, that makes sense. And now everybody's got a say in the culture and the direction of the program.
Yeah. And it opens it up and imagine a high school athlete is like, you could very easily just have it. I'm just here to play lacrosse. I don't know like what this whole extra hubbub is all about. But when you talk to a sophomore that says this and a freshman says this, and they have all these different experiences why they've ended up on that team, and you have a leader, a coach like you, putting this out in front of them and having them take time in a classroom, like away from the fields, like that, there's all this intent behind like all that time being spent, that it's kind of becomes evident that like, oh, we're not just here playing lacrosse just because of the time being spent on these things outside of lacrosse. I think that kind of like sublimates into what maybe a senior that might not have thought of it that way and might not have the perspective yet because they're 17 years old, but they start to pick up on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even little things of like, we don't practice on site, or they don't practice on site at St. Viator. We don't have a turf stadium on campus. So we drive about 15 minutes to practice every single day. And we have to practice from 3:30 to 5:30. We get out at 2:45. So it takes a lot of, laser focus and dedication to get out of school, get to your car, not mess around with your friends. But we have a carpool dock where parents, obviously got to work and they can't get their kid to practice, where we actually put the ownership on our seniors to go up to freshmen and say, hey, man, do you need me to take you? And they start building that bond. And to be honest, the cool thing is like at the end of the year, you start hearing the freshmen, sophomores talk about like the coolest experience for them was like the 15 minutes that they got in the car with a junior or a senior, a varsity guy, and they're, just starting out. Like, maybe it's the day of a big game or the day after a big win or a loss. And, it was a big loss or a tough loss, but like the vibes are good in the car and they're starting to get focused. And again, we put a lot of ownership of the program back into our students and parents' hands. So it really, really is such a buy-in from the top down. Like it's not just show up to practice and give me 2 hours and that's it. Like I truly felt like there was a daily buy-in to everything that we did, how you conducted yourself in the hallways, how you showed up to things when you're at a girls volleyball game, and you're wearing a Viator Lacrosse shirt. How do you want people to see you? How do you want the perception of your public? Because to be honest, lacrosse has a tough image. You think to Duke and all this, like we always hate talking about it, but it is the preppy prep school, wealthy, families, and especially in a private Catholic high school, that is what every person is going to immediately put you into that bucket, whether you like it or not. That was not me. I came from a blue collar union labor family. We grew up in Elk Grove Village. It was a struggle. And I saw what my parents gave up. We didn't go on vacations. I didn't drive a model year car. I didn't get lunch in the cafeteria. I had a packed lunch. And I just always want to convey that to those kids is that, like our image and our perception is the only thing that will forever control. You can't control the scoreboard. You can prep for it, but the outcome of the game is a lot of moving factors. But what people think about our program and what they see is totally up to us. So let's control it the right way.
Yeah, love that. So you already talked about the classroom session. You outlined, okay, you have classroom sessions for these maybe culture building things. Was that just for like the example of the defining MFLA and having people speak back, or was there classroom sessions throughout the season where you're doing different things building along the way?
So we would shift it every week to kind of blend to whatever like the messaging was going to be, where like, you know what, hey, we're having a little bit of a dip in like just like juice that we're bringing to practice, right? We're just kind of getting a little mundane. So there would be culture days where I'll just give you like an example. We do this like fun drawing exercise. So we'd partner them up and one half of the group has to go outside of the classroom and we tell them, hey, the picture that your partner has to draw is a shoe, but you can't use like the word lace. You can't use sneaker. You can't use, here are like the clues you can't say. You're going to go back in there and you have 2 minutes to explain to your partner what they have to draw. And the person who draws it the best, like they win. I'll get you, cookies in the cafeteria tomorrow at lunch or a chicken sandwich or, whatever. Like we throw something on the line. But again, we partner them up with people that, maybe they don't have the closest relationship with. And they'd have to come in and break that wall down and not get frustrated with each other and, use this exercise to just communicate. But like you could see they're having fun with it, but they're also being competitive. And again, that goes back to a great culture. Like the teams who are always so successful, and you probably see this on Instagram videos, but the kids who take a game of checkers to death, those teams tend to be very successful because they bring that competitive nature to everything they do. But there's a difference between being competitive, but also being compassionate and not getting, pissed off at a teammate because he's not understanding your cues. You're going back and, you'll see like the senior captain who's going to Utah, to play D1 lacrosse is paired up with a junior who, is a all academic, kid who's going to go to Tennessee next year and never touch a lacrosse stick again in his life. That kid from Utah is like sitting there and he's like, man, like I just totally blew it. I just gave the worst explanation to this kid. And they get a little humble in those exercises because the super high academic kid that they were talking to, he now gets to have his moment and say, hey, all right, my turn. I'm going to explain this even better. And you kind of just start seeing that meshing of, athlete, peer, academia, all these different things now all get broken down because we're not on the lacrosse field right now. We're just peer to peer trying to have some fun and win this silly little event that I'm putting in front of you.
Mm-hmm. It's I think the interesting takeaways from that are that, like, one, it's very like practical and purposeful. Like you're saying, going into the week, you knew, hey, we're slipping on this. This is our weak point. This is what we need to solve for as a coaching staff. And then you go from there and figure out what kind of little thing can we do to, boost that up in some way. And so, like, it's not like you're on, like, ChatGPT looking up like team bonding exercises, picking one out of a hat and then tossing it out there and being like, oh, I did our culture moment of the day. We did the Pictionary thing. It's like, no, you want to do something where they were competitive, they were meeting other people, forcing them out of their shell and getting them to, like, laugh and compete with each other. I think that part is like a very big missing component. Maybe people trying to build culture the wrong way of just picking something off of a YouTube short and trying it out.
I'm glad you said that. Like, in the lacrosse world, a lot of people love doing the hard hat, which is a big thing in the Cornell lacrosse community. They had a player who tragically passed away on the field. He got hit with a shot and passed away. Like, people see that and they read that book, they read the hard hat, and they want to bring that to their high school program. Well, maybe that's not appropriate for your high school program. Like, that Cornell team bonded over a pretty serious, life altering event to just go, hey, we're going to bring that hard hat mentality. This is going to be great. I know my kids will love it. Well, yes, they might love it. And you might tell that story, but how are you going to have that message resonate day after day when, maybe your team isn't going through a whole lot of adversity? Maybe a lot of things are going very well. During my tenure at Saint Viator, we had COVID, where we had one of the most talented rosters that never got to see the field. We had 8 Division I kids, 8 seniors going D1, never got to touch the field. We were predicted to go to state that year. My dad also passed away during this time. So COVID, my dad passes away. My first daughter's born, all in like a year of each other. And I couldn't be around my team. Now, one of the most impactful things that ever happened was when my father passed away. This was the week before the whole world shut down. We had his services. My team didn't even know my dad passed away. Bill Sanford did. He just threw it out there and said, hey, here's the services if you guys want to go. Every single player and their parents, 65 kids and their parents, showed up at the service and were the first people there. I mean, I almost get choked up talking about it even right now. Like, my mom was so overjoyed. It turned a terrible moment into euphoric, because that right there was like, okay, maybe what I'm doing is resonating in a moment where these kids are having something really important stripped away from them. They didn't need to be, doing this, and they showed up, and that just flipped everything. Like my whole coaching mantra experience, like, it went from X's and O's and wins and losses to Jimmy's and Joe's, and what can I do to leave a lasting impact on these kids, because they sure as hell left a lasting impact on me. So yeah, I mean, those little things, like, you just have to figure out that recipe of, what's going to resonate with this group, and it's going to change year after year. But don't just take something from like the high level team because you see it work at Duke or work at Cornell or worked for the Chicago Bears. Are you going to go take good, better, best and go bring it to your program? Like, I don't know if that's going to resonate. Like, that's for that group, that makes sense for them. So you just got to find what connects with you and how you can have it be brought to the table every single day, not just in that cute little one moment where it feels good, but then it goes away for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that must be kind of like the magic sauce for actually building like a really strong foundation, is that all these little things that you're doing are relevant to the team rather than random. And when you have all those relevant exercises built on each other, it'll be hard to ignore those kids of what the culture you're trying to build really means. And like you said, an event for you that's just so important to you personally, like those things you're doing start to show through in a big moment like that. You've mentioned Bill a number of times, and as we get into like this mentorship, friendship, mentorship versus friendship topic, you put this down as like one thing that you wanted to speak on, something that you probably learned from him, and maybe you've said from just growing up and like taking on new seasons of life. So tell me about like this lesson that you've learned as you've grown as a coach.
Yeah, so we'll touch on certainly like the mentorship to friendship thing because I think that like blends well into a larger conversation. So what I kind of mean by that is lacrosse in Illinois is still kind of in its I don't want to say infancy, but it's still growing and it's still new. And it's for a lot of families, it's a first generation sport. It was for me. And what you're seeing is that these younger guys who've gone out and played at college and played in high school and have lacrosse knowledge are being hired as coaches. And I think everybody has all the best intentions in the world. And, I certainly don't ever want messaging to get misconstrued because this isn't a blanketed, statement for anybody in a certain age range. But I fell into the trap too as a young coach, as I think all young coaches do, is you're fresh out of playing, you kind of want to prove yourself. So, you always keep a stick in your hand and you're the one who warms up the goalies or, you're diagramming how to split dodge somebody or, do all this stuff. And you're really kind of like, for the lack of a better term, like showing off in front of the kids. And for the young coaches, you kind of want the kids to like you, right? You're like, you walk in and you're like, man, I want these kids to like all be my boys, like I just can't, especially like at the college level. I think college coaches and college players have different dynamic than high school coaches do, where it's kind of that like more buddy buddy with their college coaches. So they kind of come out of that and they kind of start acting like that. And I think what you see is that a lot of these high school programs have a few good seasons here and a few good seasons there, but there's not a lot of longevity because are you building that respect with your players, but also your parents, right? Like if you want to put friendship at the forefront, well, maybe you're not showing your maturity to these parents and you don't get the respect of your parents. So when a mistake happens or, you lose a few games in a row, are those parents starting to say, well, I don't know if he's ready for this or, he's just, a little immature or whatnot. And you lose your credibility. So I think what you need to do right out of the gate is you got to have kind of an action plan. You have to have some methodology to what you're doing. It can't just be, well, I'm going to bring a speaker to practice and it's going to be super laid back and it's going to be fun and the boys are going to love me and I loved this drill in college and this is what I liked. So let's just do that. Well, now you've done the same drill for a month in a row. The music is becoming more of a distraction than kind of like a vibe for your boys. You didn't do your apparel orders. You haven't done your schedule. There's no weight training program. You're watching film, but you're just kind of watching games of like Maryland and Virginia, and the team that you're coaching does not have that skill level. So what are they getting out of that? And then all of a sudden it just like starts snowballing. It's like, okay, this stuff is not as cool as I thought it was. So maybe I need to step back. And as you mentioned, how I've talked about Bill Sanford, like Bill was like that right out of the gates with us. He was a young coach from the East Coast, had a wealth of knowledge. So, what he was teaching us was like earth shattering because none of us knew any of this stuff. We were all football guys playing lacrosse. But, Bill was in the building with us and a teacher. And, we had this respect with him during the school day. So by the time we got to practice, yeah, he afforded himself the ability to maybe be a little bit more laid back, but it's because he earned the trust another way. And I think you just have to be really careful with that, where if you're not in the building, and you're not developing that level of trust with your players, well, now your time between the lines is really your only opportunity to garner that trust and build that mentorship. So you got to be really careful with that. You got to, know when to, get on a guy, but then also put an arm around him and say, hey, man, do you understand why I got so upset? Because that's the other thing too. I think a lot of young coaches get upset and they flip that switch But what was the teaching point? Where did they learn in all of that yelling that you just did? Where did they learn anything? Because we fall victim to that. You get pissed off, but you also gotta say, hey, do you understand why we did that? Why I said what I said? Why I got so heated? Because the other thing too is they could be making the same mistake over and over, and that's why you're getting frustrated. And you put an arm around them and you say, hey, you understand why I got upset with you? And maybe they go, yeah, well, I just wasn't running hard enough. No, dude, your effort was great. You're just making the wrong pass. I don't want you to pass it to Joey there. You got to pass it to Jimmy there. And they go, oh, I thought it was effort. And now now it's like, oh, okay, you learned something as a coach. They learned something as a player. And now you're back on the same page as opposed to, all right, you blow the whistle, practice is over. Now you leave and you get in your car and you're both so confused as what the hell just happened and how did I not connect with that kid?
Yeah. So it sounds like for different coaches, obviously, it can be different situations, especially the in building, out of building, in terms of where you're building your trust. If you're out of building, sounds like you're limited, that you're only going to be able to do it. You're only build that like authority part of it when you're inside the lines. And I feel like to the point of being a young coach, just being somebody that like when I was 24, 25, whatever it was, and just got done playing maybe in college and stuff, like when I'm on a field, I still have the itch where when I played soccer, I just want to kick the ball around. I still have the itch so I'm sure lacrosse, you have the itch to just throw the ball around too. And not that you can't do that as a coach, obviously, but I think those things of like your leadership at that point is mostly limited to being maybe a captain. And so you're kind of leading as a captain, where a captain leader is going to be a little bit different than a coach. And having the separation is the biggest thing. The captain is involved intricately with the players, and the coach has to have that barrier in between where they let the captain do that. They have the captain for that reason to be the intricate connection, right? So I feel like that's also a huge thing. Is like as a young person, just as a young guy, be on a field, there was such a hard way to fight the itch of just joining the guys and practicing with them, right?
Yeah, dude, it is just so hard not to like just want to do it. And like I played goalie, so the beautiful thing is I don't really have to jump in, and I don't know if I really want to anymore because these kids are so much better than we were when we were in high school, and they're shooting the ball like 95 plus. Like, dude, I got a family and a daughter to go home to. I'm not wearing a 90-mile-an-hour sidearm to my inner thigh. Like, I'm sorry, that just ain't happening. Like, I got to make a business decision there.
Yeah. It's a little bit easier to step away from doing those things. Like when you've had a rolled ankle at like 31, you're like, okay, this is too much for me to take on. It's going to ruin the next few weeks of my life. So like when
Yeah,
you're young,
it
you
takes
haven't had the issue of dealing with that.
yeah, it takes you
Yeah.
4 months to heal from
That's
that,
funny.
not 4 days.
Yeah. I play like a men's league like Saturday mornings, and I'm just like, every time I do it, I just know it's such a big risk, and I'm just like praying if I get injured, this is not worth it.
It's so true.
For mentorship, friendship, I think you touched on all the things I feel like we wanted to get from there. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on from? And I feel like you spoke to the Bill's standpoint of like what he taught you from his being a coach and handing it off to you. But anything else you want to touch on?
No, I mean,
that?
I think it's relatively, I don't want to say self-explanatory, but, I think we did a good job, kind of explaining that. You did mention in there about the nuances of being in building and not in building. So maybe, it's just a good segue to just another topic. But I think what you see across the board is the programs who have a lot of longevity and success. Those coaches are in the building or have a profession that allows them to be at everything and anything and is really not a deterrent. I will firsthand tell you, I will, take this to my grave. The reason we've had a lot of success at Saint Viator is we've gone from 3 different coaches, from Bill Sanford to myself to now Jeff Hardy, who have been afforded the opportunity. Now, Jeff's not in building, but he's afforded himself a livelihood that allows him to be at everything. But when you can be at these kids' kind of beck and call, and these families beck and call, and again, this goes back to kind of that private versus public discussion, is I always felt I owe it to these families to give them an elevated experience. So if a family is going through something, or a player's going through something, or a coach is going through something, like, hey, my office door is always open. Come in, come talk to me. A parent is, upset about the game last night, 24-hour rule, but also in person. I'm not going to talk about Jimmy and Johnny's playing time via email or a text message or a phone call. Come into my office. Let's sit down. Also, your son is going to be in this conversation as well. We're not doing anybody any favors by protecting them by having these hidden conversations. And I just think you build such a way stronger sense of community, again, culture, by being able to just be around them. And like, they see you in the cafeteria, they see you at a girls volleyball game, they see you at a hockey game. I used to announce the girls volleyball games. I loved it. I would get juice. Like, they'd get a spike and I'd be like, boom, that's another ace for the Viator girl. But now that coach sees that, those girls see that, our boys see that. Now it's a sense of community across the board. It's not just impacting my program, because that was something I also shared too, is, if you want your classmates to come support you at your game, but you're not going to go do the same for them, then don't get upset when nobody shows up to your games. If you want that, go support those teams. Go to a tennis match, go to a golf match. Whatever it is. I think when they start seeing that and they see you uplifting, the theater program, the players on your program who are excelling in the classroom, you're giving them a shout out or dapping them up in the hallway and saying, dude, I just saw you got National Honor Society. Like, dude, that's awesome. Like, I'm so proud of you. When they see that, that resonates throughout your program, and you have the capability to do that when you're in building is just wonderful. I think it really, you want to have that private versus public discussion. Like, I think you throw that out the window. Go to in building versus out of building. Those coaches, when you can build that level of trust and replicate that over and over and over, that is what builds great programs. Like, I will have that recruitment talk till I'm blue in the face. Like, I love having it, but to me, I think the difference is when you have a coach who can give himself to the program unequivocally and build a community, that's where you see those programs win year after year.
Yeah, totally. We talked about it a little bit before. I was just talking with Brandon Singleton at Bennon. He had talked about like the in-building difference for him, but not only that, but he was saying like just the difference of a coach being bought in some way. And that's kind of to your point too, of like a coach that's able to be committed to the program, where he's like, there's going to be a lot of coaches in high school sports for sure that are there to, it's a side gig job and they're getting paid. And there's other people that are like, no, I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to build a program. I'm here to be part of something bigger. And it's funny how it could be the same job, the same pay, the same type of everything, but it's completely different outlooks and completely different, experiences the kids are going to get from it.
Well, I've also had the pleasure of, when I was working in private education, my role was being an enrollment director. So, these schools, we cut our teeth and make our salaries and our livings and feed our families off of our enrollment. And a lot of the driver of enrollment are these entry points through athletics. So, I know you had that discussion on your last coaches series about that recruitment. And, I think people really treat that as such a dirty word. And I don't at all, because here's the thing. If you think that like we just get to recruit and, oh my gosh, it's so much easier for you. Well, here's the thing. Come live in my shoes for a year, because you have to recruit. I am out pounding the pavement constantly, and I'm running camps, 2 to 3 in the summer. I'm creating a goalie academy. Obviously that's to give back to the larger community, but yeah, it's an opportunity for me to maybe talk to a family who's interested in coming to my school, going and coaching a summer club program. Again, yeah, I want to develop more kids. But at the same time, there's going to be a family who gets curious or says, hey, I know you're the head coach here. Tell me a little bit more about that. And that's the wonderful thing, though. And what I don't think a lot of coaches realize is I am not just, the coach at, I don't want to throw them out, but like IMG, right? Like I went to Saint Viator. I was a student there. the way I sell that place and that school and talk to families, come listen to a conversation. We don't even talk about lacrosse. There's so many more important things. And I hope other, families that hear this, when you're making a 16, 17, 18, $19,000 a year investment, it can't just be for the sport. Yes, is that very important to you? 100%. And I won't discredit that. And am I gonna, give your son or daughter an elevated experience in that regard? I sure as heck hope so. But here are all the other wonderful things that 40 years from now, I hope is your return on investment. And I just think a lot of coaches who don't see that think that we just have success and kids just show up at our doorstep. It is so far from the
Mhm.
truth. It is a grind and it is a full-time commitment to get our names out there and do marketing. I mean, my players made fun of me all the time because I had a GoPro on me at all times, running all over the field, getting footage. And then I would come home from practice and for 2 hours, terribly try to edit something together and get it out on social media because I want to build a brand. I want families and I want kids to see behind the curtain. I want them to see what goes into our success. And I don't think coaches at other programs, I don't think they do that. I don't think they take the time to do all those little nuances and send out marketing, pick up a phone call, talk to a family. It is tough. But when that is not only your full-time job, but it blends together to coaching, it helps us just become a little bit stronger.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the GoPro thing. How crazy, you probably see it on Instagram now, how crazy are these high school video clips, like the marketing that they're able to do with these student photographers and videographers,
Sure.
maybe a little bit better than probably what you were cutting together.
Yeah, way better. But it's so cool, man. Like, because you know what? Like, sports media is a business now. And there are kids who at a young age in high school, if the schools are doing it the right way, they can, start a club or have a class dedicated to that. Like, I know the kid who does it at Viator. He's a goalie there. He has his own, media hustle and he puts all the graphics together. And like, again, 1,000 times better than what I'm doing. But like, it's cool to see that because now that kid has a connection to the program that's way deeper because, maybe when he graduates and he goes to college, he can still do that. And now he's connected to the program for years to come. And that's cool. That's awesome. He's an entrepreneur now. Like I have my own drone, I have my GoPros, like I love doing it. And I want to get better at it. But like at the same time, maybe there's a kid in the program who sees me doing it and goes, "Hey, coach, let me do that." Absolutely, Jimmy, please take it over, buddy. Like you probably have more knowledge in your pinky than I do, but I do love it. I also get a little discouraged with it though too because I think like we live in a click culture and like kids get more obsessed with like the highlight over like they don't understand that what won us that game were the 35 ground balls, that we focused on. And those don't blend well on a highlight tape. So like, you just got to be careful with it. Like it's cool and it's sexy, but it's not what makes a great team.
I need to talk to Steven Cannon Stavach. He does a lot of lacrosse videos. I'm
Dude,
going to
he's
tell
the man.
him
He's
to
the
do a
man.
ground ball highlight tape. I need to have him do a ground ball tape for some schools and do some crazy
Hey,
edits with it.
maybe we got something good. We could do the clubhouse like grinder of the week or something. The
Yeah.
gritty ground ball or something.
Love it. Our last topic I want to touch on was just the state of lacrosse and like how, I mean, this is the state of like every sport and like every sport goes through the ways I feel like of club overtaking high school and priorities and balance. And I actually talked to Michael Cervantes a year or two ago about this and he kind of touched on it. At the time, he was like, it's probably eventually going to get there, but there's a little bit of a kind of gentleman's agreement between like the town and the club, but I'm sure it grows. Clubs, it's a business, so it's naturally going to try to capitalize and grow. Where's it at right now, you think, and what concerns do you have?
Yeah. And, maybe some people think I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth when you kind of answer this question. Coaching in club, if I had it my way, I would coach high school and leave it at that. But, it's just where the sport's at and we got to develop the youth and you want the sport to grow. But even right now, I have, 8th grade parents that email me that they're heartbroken because their son feels like he's, like failing me as a coach because he can't make it to a Wednesday night practice because he's got to go to his community or his town practice because he's going to go to that public high school, and that coach is coaching there, or the offensive coordinator and his buddies are on that team. And like my heart just breaks because it's like, why am I having this conversation with a 13, 14-year-old kid? Like, if you think that him going to that community practice is the most important thing for him, don't even email me. Go to that practice. Go play with your friends. Go have fun. This sport is fun. Like, when you start losing that, we're never going to get kids to play this game. You play sports, especially at those ages. I mean, transport yourself back. Like, yes, I played those sports because I was uber competitive, but I played it because I was with my friends having the time of my life. Like, that was why I wanted to play sports. And, the hard part with lacrosse right now is, like football was, you couldn't just put the pad like basketball. You can go in your driveway and you can play basketball. Baseball, you can grab your mitt and kind of like throw something together, go to the field down the street. It's hard to like replicate a game of lacrosse or a game of football. I mean, you can do it with touch and flag and all that stuff. But like, we play in a club dominated sport that has a lot of costs associated to it right out of the gate. And if we're taking the fun out of it to even get through those barriers, what are we doing? It blows my mind. Like, if we're trying to have these kids have a house league in the spring and do it like every other sport does, well, then go let them play house. Like, why do they need to feel the pressure to go to pick this practice or pick that practice or do that? Which I again, like, that's what I'm saying. I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because I am asking kids to show up to a club practice, but I don't want them to like feel guilty. Like I don't want to be the bad guy in this situation. I want them to love it and show up every day and feel like this is the greatest, years of their lacrosse experience. Because at some point, if you aspire to go play in college and it will become a larger commitment. And yes, you will still have fun with it. The best players in the world and, the Michael Jordans of the world, while it was a job and tedious, they still did love it. You don't want to take that component out of it, but it becomes a job. It becomes something larger than, picking the stick up and just going and balling out with your buddies. And I just fear that we are going to box out the kids who, myself included, who like played football their whole life and then went to high school and were like, whoa, what's this lacrosse game? And they try it out. Like, I'll tell you right now, the 3 greatest lacrosse players that I knew were Brian Goss, Matt Barry, and Patrick Murphy. Patrick and his brother Kevin. But Kevin played at Salisbury. Kevin didn't get recruited until his senior year. Bill coached him. He was a basketball kid. He didn't get recruited until his senior year and went on to be an All-American at one of the most blue blood lacrosse programs in the country in Salisbury. Matt Barry didn't play lacrosse until high school, ended up going and getting recruited to D1 Denver. Like Brian Goss never played lacrosse, played basketball, picked up a lacrosse stick, went to Rutgers and was a captain at Rutgers. Like, those are the stories I want our game to continue to be able to tell. And my fear is that we're going to lose that a little bit. And that's not a bad thing. Like, have we benefited from that at the high school level? Yeah, we've gotten kids who've come in as freshmen who, are blue chip level kids. And, we have been blessed to send kids D1 year after year. And that's a microcosm of having more access to lacrosse at a younger age. But like, let's make sure that those raw athletes that, maybe are committed to other sports right now have the gateway to try our sport and don't have that fear of testing it out because they weren't playing since they were 4 years old on a club program and traveling all over the country. Like that. I don't want to box those kids out ever because that's who I was. And I'll be damned the PK Gagers of the world don't get the opportunities to play this game.
It's such like, I mean, lacrosse, everyone's going at a different stage of it, but it's such a sport like wide ish. I mean, athletics wide issue. It's basketball in AAU. You have people saying, oh, kids are just playing for these like, fly by night teams where highlight reels. And there's, same thing for soccer, group in soccer. And so lacrosse is going through its own version of it too. And the hard part, the most concerning part probably is that like, well, it's really hard to go back to like a more inclusive sport, once you get hyper specializing. That's probably the most concerning thing. And I think for me, like I thought growing up and actually like once I started graduating high school, I started to realize like one of the coolest parts about youth sports that's going to get wiped away is like the team building, go back to the culture of like, that's been the most, you're going to lose. These kids are like jumping from club to club and what like growing up with the same group of kids from first to senior year, or even just freshman to senior year, you're not going to get any of the team building stuff and just a lot of unique things that come from playing with the same group of people and how people develop and work off each other and things like that when you're bounced around from club to club. And you're also not going to have lessons learned of like, yeah, there's going to be 3 studs on a team and there's going to be 3 kids that are just clubhouse guys and there's going to be 3 kids that are just like, tactical, but like you work with the different components you have, not just like you have 11 flashy kids that are just, so it's completely different. And maybe it's old man yellow cloud about how things grow. But I think those are life lessons that you learn and you take to, business world and you take just life about how you work with different people on your team that you're not going to get from the elite clubs that every kid that is trying to play for. And that's part that I think for me, like I get sentimental about like, well, you lose a lot of that.
I agree, man. I think that hits the nail on the head. And like when we grew up, you played youth baseball at your house league. Well, so I grew up in Elk Grove, right? Elk Grove Travelers was the team that all the best kids played on. But guess what? Guess how you made that team? Your house league had an all-star game. And the all-stars, the best kids in Elk Grove, then got awarded the opportunity to go represent Elk Grove on a higher level. Awesome. What a cool thing to aspire for. Because you know what? Hey, I had a good season last year, but it wasn't great. And I want to make the Travelers. So you know what? I'm going to try a little bit harder and I'm going to make that all-star team. And now I got something to aspire to, as opposed to I whine and I pout and I cry and I think I'm better than the kid, but I really wasn't. And I really didn't deserve it. But hey, you know what? This person's willing to start another club program over here. And I'm just going to go over here to say I'm on this premier team, but I'm not really. It's like that like inflated ego. And, you're kind of doing a disservice because you're rewarding them where maybe, a good lesson is, hey, nobody's saying that you were terrible, but you just got to work a little bit harder. And that's good. It's going to motivate you. Like you need those built-in motivators. And I think we just dissolve those a little bit because we just go pop up another club here or, to give this opportunity here. And if you pay enough money, you can have any experience you want.
Yeah. Then it takes away from the next sport in line, Then basketball has less, if every kid's playing club, then they can't also play like basketball.
100%. That's a really good way to frame it.
So any positives, anything that you could think like solutions arising that you think like that could be again, I'm all doom and gloom right now on that topic. Is there anything that you think are good solutions to this or ways that parents or other coaches can encourage balance it out?
I do think that a lot of the park districts are starting to pick it up, which is awesome. I think the clubs are doing a great job of offering their resources in terms of staff to go help these guys. So like the, dad volunteer who knows nothing about the game, which no offense to any of those guys out there, but you can get a guy in who, knows the games, played it. Like I think we're bringing the game to more people than we've ever brought it to. So it's growing tremendously. So I can't be upset in that regard. I'm sitting right here with a logo behind me of my goalie training company. Like the growth of the game has afforded me the opportunity to have a market of just goalies that say, hey, I'm not getting enough training in my specific position. I want to come to you and just work on my craft. So I think we're doing a good job of training wonderful lacrosse players in the state of Illinois. You see kids going all over the country now and making D1 rosters and starting as freshmen, 4-year players, captains. Elmhurst University is having a great year this year. They just beat Denison, who's been a perennial powerhouse. Illinois Wesleyan for a long time has kind of started, shaking the scene a little bit. Notre Dame's
My
won
alma
some
mater.
Wesleyan.
Go Titans. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, Iannucci, great dude, man. We've had some great Viator boys go there, but I think you're seeing it. You're seeing it grow. Again, we just gotta continue to find ways to have it just be more accessible to every community. Not just for the lack of a better term, the white collar communities. You want to avoid the hockey conundrum. Hockey is kind of getting that reputation of being a wealthy man's game, and you're just simply pricing families out. So I think we're doing a good job right now of being cautious of that and not falling into that trap. And I think that's more of a national discussion than a local discussion. But I think our local entities are doing a really good job of offering this sport to as many kids as possible. And that's so great to see because, man, never in a million years when I was growing up did I think in Elk Grove Village, I would drive down the street and see a kid shooting on a lacrosse goal in his backyard. And you're starting to see that. And God, that makes my heart so happy.
Yeah. I've for sure seen in Illinois of great local offerings of lacrosse, and being in Lake Forest is a big sport here. It seems like it's overtaking baseball in a lot of ways. It's for sure its own beast in this town. We haven't talked about the pure goalie development. So you just launched, right? I just botched the names. I read it out.
Yeah, we just launched.
So pure goalie development. Sorry. It keeps on cutting out. So you just launched Pure Goalie Development. I think it leads into kind of the team aspect I was just talking about too, because you have a unique way of kind of approaching it. It seems like it's very group oriented, where goalies are usually the outcasts are out by themselves training one-on-one or maybe one-on-two. And it seems like you have a different approach to it. And the team, again, culture being a big thing of yours, seems to be kind of a rooting factor of that.
Yeah. And, this style of training is becoming a little bit more popular, especially in this position. But the thing I always enjoyed, because I never had it until I went to high school, because I didn't really have somebody, kind of pushing me in high school. It was kind of my spot. And I just, kind of took it over. And then you got to college and it was uber competitive. And what I started noticing is that we started training together, playing racquetball together, doing footwork together, built-in competitiveness in practice, what was my clear percentage versus yours, my save percentage, all this stuff. And we just had these little battles. And what you're seeing is nationally, Goalie Smith is probably the most popular version of this. They travel all over the country and they do these pop-ups where, it's 60, 70 kids and, it's kind of, turn and burn. But what happens is you're learning while you're seeing shots. But then you go out of the drill and now you're watching and you're kind of seeing man, I'm not getting to my off hip shots. What am I doing? But this kid is nasty. He's really good. What's he doing? And you start kind of picking up those things from each other. And all of a sudden you see okay, you just letting 5 goals off hit, but okay, we're working as goalies. It doesn't matter. There's no scoreboard. We're here to just work on our craft. Now, all of a sudden you make 5 saves in a row off hip and the guys behind you are gassing you up and they're like, dude, good job. And now it's you leave there and you're like, okay, I just picked up a mechanic that I was really struggling on. I just got positive reinforcement from my peers, not my coaches, my peers. Man, that was awesome because now you go to practice and it's to nobody's fault, but you get thrown into, 6v6 and all these, and you're just the human dartboard and you let in, 30 goals, whatever, and you're just having a tough day of practice. But then now you come back to another session and it's all about you and you guys gassing up. These goalies just don't get that atmosphere of that continuous positive reinforcement. And again, mentality wise, you see it make a big difference too. They let in a goal and it's not the end of the world, right? Because it's that next save mentality. And we really just try to bring that culture to it. And I wouldn't say we're certainly reinventing the wheel. We are taking a tried and true method, but putting, our care and attention being Illinois guys to that community. Like, I was an Illinois goalie. All I want to do is go see 30 Illinois goalies go tear up like the college scene. Like Lucas Wagner, he's a goalie right now at Lemoyne, All American last year. Like, Illinois kid, like, that's what you want to see. You want to go see that kid and be like, hell yeah, dude, that kid is representing not only Illinois, but Illinois goalies. Like, he's not an East Coast kid. He didn't go to Culver. He didn't go to Western Reserve, big props. So, like, he went to GBS, like, played hockey, played lacrosse, and now he's tearing it up at the D1 level. Like, that is what we like want to like build. Like, we want to gas up our Illinois goalie gang and like just prop you up. And it's like the lacrosse world is small and the Illinois lacrosse goalie community is even smaller.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what you're doing for sure is not only going to bring kids, maybe make kids interested in it, but make kids that are playing the position to actually want to take it to the next level. It seems like, and have that positive reinforcement that like, no, I can, like, I'm not just the goalie of this random high school in Illinois. Like, no, I'm the goalie of this high school in Illinois, and I'm competing. I know the goalie at this other high school, and we, compete against each other and teach each other. I think that's great culture building outside of just a school, which is awesome. Well, I don't know, when was your first order with us? Probably like 2020.
When did you guys get started? Because obviously, with you being at Wesleyan, I got the tip a little earlier
Yeah.
than most because we had
Would it
alumni.
overlap with Nick Winter, or was that through Bill Sanford?
That was through Bill, but I got to know Nick because Mike Julius and I were really close. He was on my staff and he has a lake house up where I do. And I got to know all those Wesleyan guys through Julius. And Viator just kind of was a little bit of a haven for the Viator lacrosse guys. And you guys like just started, and I didn't have, affinity to any supplier. And to be honest, like, I'd always rather be able to like offer more to our kids than waste all of our budget and just get like one cool thing. And like, you guys have been always way more than competitive when it comes to price point. But I mean that in terms of quality too. Like, your stuff is great. It lasts. And we get a ton. Like, I can do a player pack. I can get, 3 t-shirts, a hoodie, and sweatpants that my boys need for like $100. Like, I get a hoodie and sweatpants, and I do that with like a bigger brand name, and that's my budget for the year. Like, so, dude, you guys are crushing it. Seriously, like, I love yours. Like, even just personally, like, you guys did this golf? We had a golf outing last year, and you guys put these hats together. And I think I emailed you on a Monday, and I had hats in hand by Friday, and the golf outing was Saturday.
And just for anybody out there, that's because he is Patrick. That's not for everybody.
True.
When you work,
I don't want to.
when you work with us like
trouble.
long though, that's what happens. We build relationships. We can like understand each other and make things like that happen. And likewise, you've been like a great understanding customers. We're growing when we're starting out, and even still now, there's a lot of lessons we learn. We're not a perfect company, and you've been a great customer helping us learn along the way and grow. So I appreciate you for that. I appreciate all the time you've given for today's interview. I think there's a lot of awesome things that we can take away from it. I'm sure we could record a whole another one again for another hour and put another one out. So thanks. Anything last words you want to put on?
No, man, I really appreciate it. I love what you guys are doing, obviously not only in the apparel game, because I think you give a lot of programs the opportunity to showcase themselves like a big time program could. And I think that goes a long way. You understand the value of marketing and again, just giving kids an experience, right? Like, I still wear apparel from my high school days and, old Champion and Russell shirts that we had when we were growing up. I love what you guys are doing. And in turn, like, stuff like this, like, how many apparel companies are taking the time to, interview coaches and, people on the back end, behind the scenes that are showcasing your apparel. It's awesome. I think you are just taking it a step deeper. So keep it up. I'm always excited to see the partnerships that you make with the big dogs, the professional teams and all that stuff. So congratulations on everything that you guys are doing. And hopefully we'll continue to be partners for years to come.